Dissatisfaction of not able to occupy the Kashmir remained and remains with Pakistanis even till today. It happened again in 1965, it again happened in 1971, and it happened once again during Operation Meghdoot in 1984, where the Siachen was taken over from the Pakistani forces and they were driven out of Siachen glacier. Namaskara, pranam to everyone. On 26th July, we are going to celebrate Vijay Divas of Kargil conflict. Before I elaborate on the role of Indian Air Force during the Kargil operation, I would take some time to explain the background why the Kargil happened. See, when we achieved independence in 1947, both the countries, the Pakistan and India, we got into action straight away. India got into action in uniting the various provinces who wanted to be independent. Then Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel got into action straight away and he stitched the country together. In contrary, what Pakistan did, they straight away planned to attack Kashmir and invade Kashmir and take it into as their territory. When the Britishers handed over power to us, there was an understanding in both the countries that army will be handed over a little later, maybe a year. So when Field Marshal Karyappa took over as the Chief of Army Staff, it was in 1949. So similarly in Pakistan also they kept the British generals for a year or so. And these Pakistanis, they understood the army generals from British will not allow them to invade Kashmir. So what they did, they hired some tribals called Pashtunis and Afridis. They paid them some 3,000 rupees per head and they sent them to loot Kashmir along with the regular soldiers from Pakistan army in plain clothes. Everybody thought they are all tribals, but half of them were the regular soldiers. After Raja Hari Singh signed the Instrument Act, accession to India, then the Indian army straight away got into action and drove them away. Almost 2/3 of the Kashmir was freed from them. Only 1/3, what we now call as POJK, Pak occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is remaining as a disputed territory, which of course very shortly we are going to take over and bring it into the fold of our Indian authority. So that dissatisfaction of not able to occupy the Kashmir remained and remains with Pakistanis even till today. It happened again in 1965, it again happened in 1971, and it happened once again during Operation Meghdoot in 1984, where the Siachen was taken over from the Pakistani forces and they were driven out of Siachen glacier. That driving out of Pakistanis from Siachen glacier was a personal insult to then Brigadier Parvez Musharraf. He was the brigade commander then, and then it remained as a factor that always bit him and he wanted to take revenge for it. Now, coming to the geography, we have something called LOC, line of actual control. It is drawn along the borders of disputed territory, that is POJK and India, to be resolved bilaterally. So then area where the Siachen glacier comes is left as an ambiguous line, which the Pakistanis wanted to take advantage, which didn't happen in 1984 during Operation Meghdoot. And in Pakistan, you know, it is the army which overrules all the political decisions. So by then, in 1999, the same Parvez Musharraf, who suffered a humiliation during 1984, wanted to take revenge by cutting off the highway somewhere near the Kargil, where all the army supply trucks move to Leh. This National 1A is a highway which connects Srinagar to Leh via Kargil. So it's a very narrow highway when it passes through the Kargil. So they wanted to cut off the highway and make the supply vehicles to stop there instead of going further to Leh and to Siachen Glacier. So that was the plan. Now what they have to do is occupy all those high rise mountain cliffs so that they can shoot the moving vehicles and stop the movement of the army vehicles. As the common understanding goes between India and Pakistan in those high altitudes, when the winter approaches, we come down to lower altitude because the very harsh weather during winter where the temperature drops to minus 45 degrees, minus 50 degrees. So then during spring we go up and occupy the our posts on either side. But this time in 1999, what Indian Army discovered that Pakistan soldiers disguised as tribal people, or they call them freedom fighters, but they were all basically some of the trained terrorists and regular Northern Army soldiers, Northern Infantry Army soldiers from Pakistan. So when they realized we already occupied 130 different heights, preventing the Indian Army soldiers to reoccupy those heights and the movement of the vehicles, then Indian Army got into action. You see, in mountain warfare, what happens? If a person is sitting on top, it requires 9 soldiers to fight against him and recapture the top. So in mountain warfare, it is 1:9. That means the person who is occupying the heights has a greater advantage, 9 times the greater advantage of the person who wants to now dislodge him from the heights. So this is what is Indian Army was forced to face, to evacuate all these occupiers from the heights and recapture the Indian Army. Called this operation as Operation Vijay, and it started sometime in beginning of May, and the Indian Air Force also was called in to help the ground operations, and the operation conducted by the Indian Air Force is called safedh sagar. Safedh sagar basically means you are operating in the bright sunlit mountain snow peak mountains. So it was looking like one big ocean of whiteness. Now what happened during initial days of safedh sagar was, for the army we have a specialized corps who are trained to fight in mountains. But for the Air Force, there is no speciality of mountain warfare, air warfare. So it was a little difficult to understand the implication of such operation. Firstly, the enemy is sitting at a height of 16,000 to 17,000 feet. Now, in one incident where a Canberra aeroplane from Indian Air Force went to do photo reconnaissance, that means they wanted to photograph all the Indian side of the mountain peaks so that to know what is the situation. So that was hit by a missile fired by the Pakistanis who were occupying the mountain peaks. So when they realized the Pakistanis have the ability to shoulder fire the missile, then the operation has to be carefully thought about how to attack these mountain peaks without getting hurt. So in another incident, Flight Lieutenant Nachiket, who went in his MiG-27 to bomb the area, his engine malfunctioned and he had to eject, and he ejected on the other side of the LOC, and he was captured and he was tortured, which of course later on he was released. But while he ejected from his aeroplane, just behind him one squadron leader Ahuja went to locate him, and he was shot by again the Pakistani missiles, and we lost him. Very next day, one more helicopter also sustained missile hits, and we lost 4 more precious lives. Flight Lieutenant Mohilan, who is from Belgaum, he was also martyred in that operation. Now this is a warning bell to Indian Air Force. They have to now re-strategize the whole thing, given the limitations of terrain. And one more very important limitation which was set by the Indian government is not to cross the LOC at any time during the operation, because that will escalate the limited operations into a full-scale war. So that was the fear by our then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and we had to abide by it. So with all these limitations, now we have to rework how the operations have to be conducted. So first decision was, let us not involve the helicopters anymore in this hostile environment, because they will be easily targeted by the enemy shoulder fired missiles. So the helicopters are moved away, and now they brought in the fighters. Now the fighters also get few seconds to spot the enemy and to bomb him. So now we have to use very precise laser guided bombs, and we had very limited. Laser guided bombs are very expensive. Each bomb costs something like 20 crores. So we have to use them very judiciously and very effectively. So now the Mirage fleet, which is based in Gwalior, was selected for this. And fortunately around that time we had purchased some laser guided kits from Israel, and few pilots were trained on that. And there were some engineers then working in HAL, Bangalore, and they were also involved in modifying the laser guided and fit them into Mirages. And the tactics of how to do the aerial attack was practiced in something called TAC-D, which is the Top Gun version of the Indian Air Force, which is based in Jamnagar, and the tactics were practiced in Pokhran desert, simulating the condition of the Kargil heights. So all these preparations were done, and now the Mirages from Gwalior were moved closer to Kargil in bases in Punjab and Adhampur and Ambala. So now during this time a camp was found on the other side of the mountain range, from where the food and ammunition supply to the Pakistanis were carrying out. That place is called Muntho Dalo. Now the first action by the Indian Air Force was to destroy this Muntho Dalo camp. So the attack was organized. 4 aircraft went and they bombed. Some 24 bombs were dropped all over that camp, and the camp was destroyed completely. All the supplies of food, ammunition was cut off. Nearly 300 Pakistani soldiers were reported dead, and there was absolutely no radio communication coming out of that camp. So now the hills and their peaks have to be occupied. The next target was Tiger Hill. Now the Tiger Hill was the main peak, which was considered invincible because they are already fortified sitting Pakistanis. Now 4 aircrafts, Mirage 2000, equipped with the laser guided bombs, took off from Adhampur on early morning and headed towards Kargil. Wing Commander Raghunath Nambiar was the mission commander, and Wing Commander Raghunath was trained in Israel about laser guided bomb attack, and this is the time for him to test the training that he acquired in Israel. So they flew over the Kargil peaks, made an assessment of the situation and commenced the dive attack. The limit that was given to them was they cannot descend below 28,000 feet so that they can remain clear of the enemy missile attack. So he spotted the top of the Tiger Hill, and the head-up display system on the windscreen of the aeroplane was locked onto the target, and he gave a call, I have locked on the target and I am ready. And behind him were 3 aircrafts. They also echoed this, yes, roger that, we are also ready. And he released the first laser bomb, which hit the target, and the enormous blast destroyed nearly half the peak of the Tiger Hill. And followed by 3 aircrafts, they also did the same thing. And the last aircraft videographed all the destruction that happened during their attack and brought it, and this was broadcasted on the national television. So then on 4th July, the army conducted a very successful operation very daring and adventurous operation and completely freed the Tiger Hilltop from the Pakistanis. So this had a major impact on the Kargil operations, and by July 10th it was almost 90% of the occupied peaks were freed from Pakistan soldiers. So this operation from the Indian Air Force was very swift and very lethal. It lasted for a very short time, but it was very effective and it decided the future outcome, and that's how finally by July 26 the entire operation got over and India once again achieved the victory. The motto of Indian Air Force is Nabhasparsham Deeptam. That means touching the sky with glory. This sentence is taken from a verse from Bhagavad Gita extolling the Vishwarupa of the Almighty God, that he appears for a fleeting moment, but the effect of his Vishwarupa is one that cannot be explained. So similarly, the air power of Indian Air Force, which appeared for a very short time and attacking very swiftly and lethally, and then when it disappeared, it left a very intense destruction behind. So that is the apt motto which Indian Air Force continues to follow even today. Thank you.